In the long shadow of the Great Crusade, there walked a figure spoken of in whispers, a warrior cloaked in secrecy, as feared by his enemies as he was mistrusted by some of his kin. He was Lionel Johnson the First, Lord of the Dark Angels, Master of the First Legion. To his sons, he was the blade in the dark, the knight without peer, the lion who would never bend. To his brothers, he was a riddle, aloof, proud, a commander whose loyalty was never questioned, yet never fully understood. He was the emperor's executioner in all but name, the hidden hand that turned the tide of 100 wars. Yet his life before the Imperium remains clouded, a tale born in the forests of Caliban, where monsters roamed and only greater monsters could survive. There, the boy who would become the lion was tempered in solitude, forged in violence, and crowned in mystery. This is the story of the lion, the first son of the emperor, whose path would carve both triumph and shadow into the history of mankind. Before the age of betrayal, before the dream of unity lay broken in blood, there were 20 sons of the emperor, each a demigod, each a weapon shaped to lead humanity into a new age. These were the Primarchs, forged from his own genetic essence. They were meant to be generals, kings and crusaders, the architects of the Imperium to come. But even in the Emperor's deepest sanctums, the touch of chaos could not be kept at bay. The dark gods, ever watchful, struck out across the veil of reality. They could not unmake the Emperor's sons, but they could scatter them. In a storm of sorcery and malice, the infant Primarchs were hurled through the immaterium, cast adrift upon distant worlds. Each would land upon a different sphere of mankind's scattered domain, their fates twisted by chance and the will of the warp. So it was that one child, tall, fierce, and silent, came to rest upon a world called Caliban, a planet cloaked in endless forests, its people bound to crumbling fortresses and knightly orders, forever at war with the beasts that prowled the shadowed wilds. Here the child was found, and here he would grow. He would be named Lionel Johnson, the lion son of the forest. Caliban was a world scarred by old night, its people scattered into isolated holds and keeps, each fighting to survive amid the endless dark forests. From the mountain fortress of Alderuch, the Knights of the Order rode out to guard humanity against the great beasts, towering predators, remnants of a forgotten age. It was into this world, amid one of its harshest winters, that the lion was found. A patrol of the Order, among them Luther, discovered him not in a cradle, but in battle. They first came upon a great beast, its throat torn out by impossible strength. The trail led them to a clearing, where golden-haired youth, naked and bloodied, pressed his back to the bole of a tree. His eyes, green and unyielding, studied the knights with calculation. Luther saw what the rest could not. This was no beast, no mutant. This was a man, wounded, cornered, yet proud. With careful words and open hands, he bridged the gap. The knights gave him a name, born of jest and awe, the Lion. Taken to Alderuch, the youth was received into the Order. At first he could not speak their tongue, but within weeks he learned, his intelligence as uncanny as his strength. The arts of reading, speech, and discipline came to him with unnatural ease. And in the hall of Alderuch, among the spiral banners and the oaths of the Order, he was made one of them. Luther became his closest guide, a mentor and brother in arms. The lion surpassed all others in skill, mastering sword, bow, and hunt as though he had been born to them. Yet where Luther was warm, charismatic, and beloved, the lion was distant, a figure of silent command. The two together became the pillars of the Order, their bond forged in the snow of that first meeting. In the years to come, that bond would shape the fate of Caliban, and one day, Johnson did not rest. With the beasts destroyed, he demanded fealty from every knightly order of Caliban. Most bent the knee willingly, awed by his strength and inspired by his vision. But not all. The knights of Lupus, proud and corrupted, refused to submit. Their defiance was short-lived. Johnson led the hunt himself, and in fire and blood their order was annihilated, their halls reduced to ruins. By blade and by will, the Lion had united Caliban. For the first time since Old Night, the forests were tamed, the knightly orders bound beneath a single master. It was a triumph that reshaped the world and set the stage for destiny to come. When the Emperor at last walked the halls of Alderuk, all of Caliban seemed to hold its breath. The Lion, silent and watchful, bowed before him, a son before his father, a weapon before its master. No words of affection were spoken, nor were they needed. The bond was immediate, written in the marrow of both men. The Emperor had found his child, and in him the living image of command. It was there that the First Legion was placed into the Lion's hands. No longer merely the order, no longer knights bound to one forest-shrouded world, but the dark angels, eldest and most honored of all the Astartes hosts. The Emperor had found in his son the general he required, the shield and sword to drive back the night. But amidst the triumph, one figure stood apart, Luther, who had been his voice among men, his closest companion. He was honored, yet diminished. Too old to undergo the gene forging of the Legion, he could not rise as a space marine at his brother's side. Instead, he was granted a place of command, a trusted lieutenant to guide those who would never know the touch of gene seed. On that day, Luther swore his loyalty without hesitation. He smiled as the Lion was hailed. He bent the knee as the Emperor spoke of glory and conquest. Yet in the secret chambers of his heart, something fragile cracked. For the first time, Luther looked at the Lion not as an equal, not as a brother, but as one set upon a higher path. A path from which he was forever barred. In the wake of the Emperor's coming, Caliban ceased to be the world it had been. Men and women poured down from the skyships, priests, scribes, artificers, and strangers with names like songs, and the planet's old stories began to change beneath their feet. Under Lionel Johnson's command, the order was folded into that greater will. Knightly banners were lowered, and at the Lion's bidding, many orders were disbanded and brought beneath the First Legion's standard. Not all accepted this union in good heart. Old rivalries and haughty pride stung, and seeds of dissent grew in shadow, even as the planet embraced a new order. At the heart of it all stood two figures whose bond would shape Caliban's fate. Lionel Johnson, found in the snow, feral and terrible, rising to mastery with uncanny swiftness, took the field as a commander unmatched, his blade rising against the beasts and then raising men to a single purpose. Beside him was Luther, orator, mentor and brother in arms, the warm voice that drew other grand masters into the Lion's crusade. Where the Lion was a living blade, distant and reserved, Luther was the spark that made the knights follow him. It was Luther's speeches that bound small orders into one great force. It was the Lion's victories that crowned him supreme grand master and bent the greatest houses to his will. So Caliban was remade within a single decade, a world of industry and regiment, of forge and barracks, of high temples to the mechanicum and drill grounds where peasants became soldiers. The old life did not vanish at once. It muttered and schemed in cloistered rooms, and not every man welcomed the change. Yet the transformation was real and irreversible. The Emperor's touch had turned a planet of scattered keepers into a funnel of men, steel, and purpose for the Great Crusade. And the Lion and Luther, in unequal measure, were the hands that shaped that destiny. Not all loved the change, and many of the older knights of the Order tried to eliminate the instruments of change, the Emperor and the Lion. This failed. With his power base secured and the first of Caliban's sons reforged as Astartes, Lionel Johnson stood before his legion and gave it a new name. No longer were they simply the first, the Emperor's original creation defined only by the weight of precedence. Now they bore a name with roots in Caliban's deepest myths. They would be the Dark Angels, a title drawn from an ancient tale whispered in the firelight of the nightly halls of winged warriors who descended from the heavens in the world's distant past, wielding swords of light against the darkness. To the simple people of Caliban, the myth had always been half-forgotten legend. To the Legion, under their newly found father, it became identity, destiny, and burden. Luther, ever at Johnson's side, could not join his brother fully in this transformation. He was too old for gene seed implantation, too set in body to become a true angel of death, and yet he would not be left behind. The Imperium's artisans and gene craftsmen remade him as best they could, through surgery, alchemy, and chemical enhancement. He was taller, stronger, quicker than any mortal man. His lifespan extended far beyond what nature would have granted. But he was not an Astartes. That distinction, that gulf, would forever remain. For a time, it did not matter. He was Johnson's second still, as he had been in the days of the Order and in the wars against the great beasts. Yet the truth could not be hidden. His place was not equal anymore. In the ranks of the Legion, amidst giants bred for war, Luther was something less. He could lead men, but not stand amongst angels. The pride that had carried him through years of struggle began, imperceptibly at first, to sour. He saw his brother hailed as a demigod, chosen by the Emperor himself, while he was consigned to a supporting role, necessary, trusted, but never central. In the cracks of that, envy found fertile soil, and so the Legion strode forth beneath its new name. It was a golden beginning. The Lion, Luther, and their angels marched at the Emperor's side, the weight of ancient myth transfigured into present glory. Yet even in triumph, a shadow lingered. Luther's pride bent under the truth of what he was and what he could never be. Even as Johnson ascended higher, it was the first thread of a tension that would one day unravel. The chamber of the invincible reason was silent, heavy with expectation. Hundreds of warriors stood arrayed in black plate, the sons of the First Legion, their eyes fixed forward as the doors opened. Through them stepped their father, Lionel Johnson, the master of Caliban, and now Lord of the Legion. His presence filled the hall as though the air itself bowed before him. For many, this was the first time they had seen him in the flesh, and awe rippled through the ranks, though no voice dared to break the silence. The Lion walked with the surety of one who had long since known his destiny. His gaze swept over the assembled warriors, knights who had once been men of Caliban, now reborn through the gene seed of the Emperor, sculpted into angels of death. They had fought under his banner against the beasts of the forests, and now they would carry his name across the stars. And the assembled angels were brought together in his unifying vision. He wove together the ancient hexagrammaton of the first with the knightly doctrines of Caliban, forging a new order that refined and elevated both. With allies from Zana at his side and 20,000 warriors sworn to him, he began a crusade, not against alien or heretic, but to reclaim his own. Across the stars he sought the scattered companies of his legion, and at each meeting he tested their captains in combat, proving himself in steel rather than in promise. One by one the companies bent the knee, their loyalty earned blade to blade, until the scattered first once more stood as a host. Within only a handful of years, 100,000 dark angels had gathered at Gramarye, their ancient fortress world. There, another council assembled, and there the Lion once again proved his supremacy in battle, dueling the champion of the host of fire. For an hour the duel raged, watched in silence by the sons of the Legion, until at last the Lion prevailed. He accepted then the mantle of Grand Master of the First, taking into his charge the 6 great wings of the hexagrammaton: Deathwing, Ravenwing, Dreadwing, Firewing, Ironwing, and Stormwing. Before his assembled sons, He swore an oath of loyalty to them and to their cause, and in turn they swore fealty to him. Their first trial came swiftly, for Carcassonne had risen in rebellion against the Ultramarines' garrison left to guard it. The Dark Angels descended like a storm under their Primarch's command, striking with such force and brilliance that all memory of earlier defeats was burned away. Where once the first had faltered, now they triumphed, rescuing their Ultramarine brothers from certain ruin and proving to the galaxy that the Lion and his sons had claimed their rightful place in the Great Crusade. In the wake of Carcassonne, the Dark Angels marched at their Primarch's side with renewed purpose, each victory forging them tighter into the weapon the Lion envisioned. No longer the fractured brotherhood he had first inherited, they were now a legion united under oath, hierarchy, and myth, their 6 wings acting in perfect concert across the vast theaters of the Great Crusade. The Lion carried them relentlessly forward, never resting long upon a single triumph, for his mind was always drawn to the wider war, to the endless frontier where mankind's dominion must be won by fire and steel. Under his hand, the Dark Angels became exemplars of discipline and ruthlessness, bringing compliance with a cold efficiency that reminded all who faced them that the First Legion was as much a blade of terror as it was of liberation. Wherever the scattered banners of the Dark Angels were found, the Lion came among them, and with each company folded back into his command, the Legion's might swelled until few could contest its supremacy. The Council of Masters, once doubtful and divided, now bent wholly to his vision, for the proof lay in victory after victory. It does The campaign's climax came within the Crimson Fortress itself. With its walls breached and its defenders shattered, the two Primarchs stood at the height of their triumph. But victory did not cool their blood. Harsh words became challenges, and challenges became blows. What began as a clash of blades soon became something more. A duel of brothers, terrible in its fury. They fought as only Primarchs could, their weapons sparking and shrieking in the echoing halls. The lion's blade met the teeth of Krakenmore, Russ's brutal chain weapon. In a storm of steel and hatred, armor split and blood spilled, but still neither yielded. The lion struck with the precision of a master duelist, each cut measured and merciless. Russ answered with raw animal power, hurling himself bodily into his brother, driving him back through stone pillars and tearing the hall itself apart. The battle spilled into the open air, onto high platforms overlooking the burning plains of Dulan. Thunder rolled across a sky blackened with smoke, lightning flashing as if the heavens themselves judged the duel. Rain lashed down as they clashed again and again, sword against axe, fist against helm. The lion's voice dripped with contempt, mocking Russ as a barbarian who could never be trusted, his legion little more than savages. Russ spat back his own fury, accusing his brother of vanity, of striving endlessly for recognition their father would never grant. Names like Sanguinius and Horus hung between them, shadows of brothers more beloved. They tore into one another with a fury that stripped away pride and purpose, until at last they were no longer Primarchs but brawlers, their armor shattered, their weapons lost, their fists doing the work of their blades. They crashed through walls and parapets, tumbled across stone and steel, and still they rose, still they fought. Every strike echoed with decades of rivalry, every blow a scar across their bond as brothers. At last, Russ faltered. Exhaustion and wounds took their toll, and he sank to his knees, laughter bubbling from his lips, not mirthful, but bitter, wild, and broken. He laughed at the absurdity of it all, that they had brought ruin to a world and themselves in equal measure, and still the lion demanded satisfaction. The Wolf King threw back his head, roaring his laughter to the storm, and in that moment of madness, the lion struck the final blow. His fist, bloodied and iron-hard, smashed across Russ's skull. The Wolf King fell silent, his body crumpling into unconsciousness. The duel was done, not by choice, not by mercy, but by the lion's unrelenting need to finish what they had begun. So ended the clash of the lion and the wolf at Dulan, not a duel of honor nor of justice, but of pride. A wound was opened that day that would never fully heal. Though Russ and the lion would march together again, the echo of that savage fight rang down the centuries, a grim reminder that even the Emperor's sons could be undone by the weight of their own pride. When the lion was campaigning in the Shield Worlds against the Gordian League, word reached him of Horus's treachery. He knew at once what this meant, that if Horus was to truly crown himself as master of mankind, he would have to come to Terra. For as long as the Emperor sat within the walls of the palace, no rebel fleet could claim victory. The lion did not march directly against Horus, for he was too cunning to try and break the War Master's strength head-on. Instead, he struck where Horus's plans depended most. With only a handful of chosen warriors, he descended upon the Forge world of Diamat, where Horus sought vast siege engines capable of breaking the walls of Terra itself. Against impossible odds, the lion seized those weapons, denying the War Master his prize. It was a master stroke of indirect war. No great host, no clash of legions, just a small, surgical strike that denied Horus the means to reach the Emperor. Yet from victory came ambition. Meeting with Perturabo soon after, the lion bargained those captured siege engines in exchange for the Iron Lord's support, should the mantle of War Master fall vacant after Horus's defeat. Perturabo played the part of ally well, but he was already sworn to the traitor cause. Thus the lion's gambit gave away what he had so cleverly won, and the seeds of later tragedy were sown. Believing himself poised to march for terror at the head of his legion, he turned back to the Shield Worlds, unaware that the massacre at Istvan V was about to redraw the galaxy in blood. While Horus scattered loyalist forces to draw them away from terror, the Dark Angels found themselves locked in war with the Night Lords across the eastern fringes, in a campaign that came to be called the Thramma's Crusade. It was a grinding genocide, worlds scoured bare beneath the Night Haunter's cruelty. On a blasted world, the Lion met Conrad face to face. His brother spoke of visions, of futures written in suffering, telling the Lion that doom awaited his sons, that darkness would stalk the Dark Angels forever. The words soon gave way to blades, and the Lion left that world with his throat torn, Conrad with a sword lodged in his back. From the wreckage of Thrammas, the Lion gained something terrible and powerful, a warp engine, a device of unfathomable design that could bind entire fleets into a single, coordinated jump through the immaterium. It was a weapon of movement and surprise, and with it the Lion set traps for the Night Lords, ambushing their fleets and clashing with Conrad again and again. One such duel left the Night Haunter comatose, but even broken, he found his way onto the invincible Reason. For 16 weeks, Conrad haunted the ship's decks, striking and vanishing, while the Lion hunted him room by room, always a step too late. It was a nightmare of shadows, a brother's war waged in the bowels of a fortress ship. During these battles, the Lion made choices that would scar his legion. When demons poured into real space, he ignored the Edict of Nicaea and restored his librarians, ordering them to wield their powers in open war. Many among his sons questioned him, most of all Nemiel, who had once been his most loyal captain. The dispute grew into rebellion, and the Lion himself ended it with his own sword, killing Nemiel rather than bend. The First Legion was shaken, but still followed their master. Even when Kairos Fate Weaver, a lord of change, came before him and attempted to turn his soul, it found nothing to corrupt. The Lion's loyalty was absolute, and he ended the daemon with one thrust, remarking coldly if it had foreseen its own death. When the warp was torn apart by the ruin storm and the path to terror was closed, the Lion sought another way. He saw the light of the Pharos and followed it to Ultramar, where he joined Robuta Guilliman and Sanguinius. Out of despair and necessity, they forged Imperium Secundus, a bastion to hold humanity should terror be lost. Guilliman was crowned emperor of this new domain, and the Lion was made Lord Protector, a title heavy with echoes of War Master. But the Lion's nature, secretive and uncompromising, soon brought strife. When Conrad escaped captivity again and turned Ultramar into his hunting ground, the Lion hunted him with an obsession that unsettled even his brothers. He imposed martial law on Macraga, deployed the Dreadwing to scour rebels, and even considered erasing whole cities from orbit to flush Conrad out. Guilliman and Sanguinius resisted him, but the Lion pressed forward until finally, in the shadowed vaults of Alma Mons, he cornered the Night Haunter. Their duel was brutal. The Lion broke Conrad's back across his knee and dragged him before his brothers in chains. Yet even broken, Conrad turned the trial into theater, confessing his crimes, yet denying guilt, for he claimed he had been made to act as he did, and so bore no responsibility. He accused the Lion of secret orbital bombardments, sowed distrust between the brothers, and the fragile unity collapsed. Guilliman broke the Lion's blade in anger, Sanguinius dismissed him from rule, and the Dark Angels withdrew. But the Lion was not yet finished. He returned from brooding as Conrad was about to be executed, with word that Conrad's prophecies of his own death proved the Emperor still lived, for only the master of mankind could send such visions. He knelt before his brothers and swore he would serve as Conrad's jailer. Thus the broken Night Haunter was kept aboard the invincible Reason, locked in the dark, while the Lion strategized on what was to come. bringing down monstrosities of brass and iron. For the first time, the lion fought in unison with Gilliman, both brothers turning their fury on a towering soul grinder and cutting it apart. At last, Sanguinius broke free, and Davin itself was annihilated with cyclonic torpedoes. Where once the plague world had sat, now there was only a void, and within that void, a breach in the ruin storm, a path that led straight to terror. But Horus had foreseen it. The route was heavily blockaded, his fleets lying in wait. The Primarchs resolved on a desperate gambit. Gilliman and the lion would split the enemy, striking hard to draw them off, while Sanguinius and his sons ran the gauntlet to terror, for it was the angel's fate to be there at the end. The lion, his rage sharpened to a spear point, swore to do more than distract. He would make the traitor worlds bleed. His crusade of vengeance became a thing of fire and iron, the passage of the angels. Later, when the Astronomicon flickered and died, the lion took it as proof that terror had fallen. In despair, he turned wholly to ruin, unleashing the full fury of his legion on the traitors' homeworlds. Chemos was burned, Barbarus was shattered, and countless lesser worlds were purged. The lion justified it as strategy, to pull reinforcements away from terror, but his sons saw the truth in his eyes. He relished the retribution. When at last his course bent toward deliverance, he found Leman Russ and Corvus Corax mustering what remained of their legions. The Raven Guard were battered nearly to extinction, their numbers thinned from Istvan, and Corax was wary of committing what few sons remained. The lion pressed him, his temper sharp as a blade, demanding that the Raven Lord stand in vengeance beside him. Corax answered cautiously, holding back, giving only a token force. But Russ, ever the Wolf King, answered differently. Scarred and worn though the Space Wolves were, he spat defiance and pledged his legion to the lion's grim crusade, seeing in this firestorm a chance to repay the treachery of Horus. Yet when their fleets finally turned for terror, guided still by the unnatural will of the rock's demon engine, it was too late. Racked by grief at the fate of his father, hollowed by the lateness of his vengeance, he returned to Caliban to gather strength. There he sought to rebuild his shattered order, to consolidate his legion's might upon the world of his birth. But Caliban was no longer his. As the invincible reason and the great ships of the Dark Angels translated into orbit, a storm of fire met them. Planetary batteries, mighty weapons emplaced upon the surface of Caliban, spat their fury. Entire squadrons died in the opening salvo. The lion, shocked beyond words, pulled back his fleet and sought the truth. A trader vessel, intercepted amid the chaos, spoke the name that froze the lion's soul. Luther, his once brother, once companion, had poisoned the garrison, turned the angels of Caliban against their Primarch. The lion saw only the hand of chaos in this betrayal. His fury was unleashed. Orbital fire rained down upon Caliban. Cities burned, forests turned to ash, mountains split apart. Those who had once been brothers now fought like cornered beasts, believing themselves betrayed by the Primarch who had exiled them. Amid this cataclysm, the lion descended in person, leading his forces against the last stronghold of the Order's fortress monastery. There, in the ruins of their shared past, he found Luther. But it was no longer Luther. Chaos had swollen him with power, raised him to strength equal to a Primarch. What followed was no duel, but an earthquake given form. Monastery walls fell, stone turned to dust. The world itself groaned as brother struck brother. The lion, though mighty, was struck down at last by a psychic assault that tore through his mind and body, leaving him mortally wounded. And in that moment the veil was lifted from Luther's eyes. He saw what he had done, saw the ruin of his soul and the blood upon his hands, and in despair he fell to his knees. But it was too late. The Chaos Gods, enraged at their pawn's failure, unleashed a warp storm upon Caliban. The surface cracked, the world broke apart, and only the monastery, shielded by its vast wards, remained. When the storm at last subsided, Caliban was no more. The surviving traitors were cast into the warp, scattered as the fallen. Of the lion there was no trace. The dark angels searched the ruins and found only Luther, broken, muttering through his tears that the lion had been taken by the watchers in the dark, and that one day he would return, bringing forgiveness. So passed the first son, vanishing into myth, as his legion bore the wound of Caliban's fall for 10,000 years. The lion himself lay hidden, asleep in the deep places of the rock, his body preserved, his spirit beyond reach, until the time would come when he would walk once more. The long silence broke in the dark heart of the 41st millennium. After 10,000 years of slumber, Lionel Johnson stirred. He awoke in Mirror Caliban, a twilight reflection of his lost homeworld, without memory and wandering through forests that were both real and unreal. A watcher in the dark came to him, guiding him with riddles, warning him of the shadows and of the strength he had yet to regain. In that strange realm he followed the stench of corruption, hunting its trail until his steps carried him from Mirror Caliban into the real galaxy, where he encountered Zabriel, a fallen angel who had resisted the corruption of chaos. The sight of his lost son shook his spirit and restored his memory, piece by piece, until the lion remembered who he was. From then, he learned to walk the forest paths at will, using the strange gift of forest walk to move unseen between worlds. The lion began to gather those of the fallen who still remained loyal. They became the risen, warriors marked by shame but seeking redemption. With them, and with Auxilia drawn to his banner, the lion struck out across the Imperium Nihilus, saving worlds from the predations of warbands and Xenos marauders. And within that twilight forest, he discovered relics long thought lost, the power sword, fealty, and in the heart of a forbidden dome, the Emperor's shield. There he fought a demon that took on the faces of his Primarch brothers, breaking his spirit with memory and grief. But the lion shattered the creature, wielding the shield with the strength of his father's blood. Word of his return spread. Blood angels came, and their chapter master Dante confirmed the truth that stunned the lion most of all. Robert Guilliman yet lived, awakened to lead the Imperium. Before long, the lion's path carried him to the Idolatros system, where Vashtor the Archiphane and Abaddon the Despoiler unleashed their arcs of omen to tear open the galaxy. Vashtor sought the key, a weapon to unravel the Emperor's realm, and the Black Legion struck alongside the Berserk World Eaters. The lion walked into the storm of war, manifesting upon the cursed world of Wormwood. There, amidst fire and ruin, he appeared at Dante's side, just as Angron, demon Primarch of the World Eaters, closed in to destroy him. The Knight of Caliban met the Red Angel in single combat, shield against axe, will against rage. Their duel was apocalyptic. As they fell deeper into the bowls of wormwood, still Angron thundered after his prey. Again the lion evaded, struck, and faded back from his enemies' lightning-fast counterattack. In his mind he fought monsters again in the mist, like on Caliban. The few times Angron landed a blow, the Emperor's shield was always there to block and send the demon Primarch reeling back. All the while, Angron's rage mounted until it danced across his body as spectral flame. His muscles and eyes bulged as though he might literally burst from the anger welling within. A piston rushed from the depths and discharged steam as it slammed to a halt at its apogee. For a moment it blasted aside the veil of smog, and the lion was revealed in the act of slipping around Angron's flank for yet another strike. There was no thought, only the primal urge to kill, as Angron beat his wings and hurled himself himself at the lion like a living avalanche. He swung his weapon in wide arcs as he came, aiming to scissor them through the lion's neck. In a move no shield could possibly block, but the lion did not defend. Instead, with speed, he dropped to one knee, braced his blade with his whole body, and let Angron slam straight into its raised point. The demon Primarch's own impetus drove the glowing blade up through his torso until it erupted from the nape of his beck in a fountain of gore. Borne on by the force of Angron's charge, the two demigods rolled and bounced through the fumes. Angron came to rest on his back, one wing pinned beneath him, his body unable to re-knit, and he sought to remove the lion's sword. The lion gripped the Emperor's shield, and with a roar brought his shield down upon the demon Primarch head, driving it through the bridge of Angron's nose with such force it embedded in the metal beneath. His form detonated, but the lion was thrown clear of the blast. The lion and his risen cut a path through the foe, rallying the Blood Angels and the Unforgiven, buying them time to evacuate before Wormwood activated. And now the lion learns that the planet is a stitched-together abomination of his destroyed home world. From that day forward, Lionel Johnson was hailed as the Knight of Neolus, savior of the Imperium's darkest half. Yet his return brought not comfort but judgment. Where Gilliman rebuilt through lore and structure, the Lion strode from world to world, dealing not with lords or governors but with soldiers and common folk, sweeping aside broken rulers and rotten hierarchies. His coming heralded upheaval and change, for he brooked no weakness, no corruption, no stagnation. 10 millennia after he vanished into myth, the first son walked again, weary, scarred but unbroken. A knight returned to a kingdom long fallen and a reckoning yet to be written.